Hey guys, my name's Dazz. I'm one of the guys behind the VGFacts videos. I was recently given the chance to talk with the creator of Citizens of Earth, an RPG that was recently released to high praises. I also just wanted to preface this video by apologising for the audio quality, as it isn't fantastic due to limitations with recording.
Okay, so let's get started. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ryan Vandendyck. I'm the game director of Citizens of Earth and founder of Eden Industries, the studio that made it.
Okay, excellent. So, many people will remember Citizens of Earth as a Kickstarter campaign, which I seem to remember it didn't follow through, and eventually Atlas came in. Mm-hmm. So how did that come about? Like, when did Atlas really get involved?
Well, you know, we had shown Atlas the game back in GDC 2013. So that was about March 2013. The Kickstarter was like in October. So we had sort of met with them and talked with them quite a ways before we launched the Kickstarter, but nothing was official. We sort of just talked forth. They liked the game, but we didn't have any, deal, any agreement yet. So, but because we wanted to keep developing the game, we needed some funding. So we thought, well, since we don't have any agreement here yet, let's try Kickstarter. That didn't quite work out, but Atlas, they were totally not deterred. They're like, well, we still believe in the game. We still really want to be involved. So, and then, we kept talking and we sorted out a deal. So, cool. Yeah.
Because the thing I seem to remember is the time when you sort of launched on Kickstarter was when Kickstarter was kind of up in the air a little bit. Like, certain projects had come out and everyone was a little bit reluctant to really fund anything. Because I seem to remember there was a lot of press about Citizens of Earth, and it was like, this is a game that looked amazing, but everyone was sort of reluctant to really invest. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, how do you feel about that situation?
I think you're right. I mean, I don't necessarily follow Kickstarter at a time, but a lot of people have come up to me and said, oh yeah, I think, your timing was just bad. The climate of Kickstarter wasn't right for it. I mean, it's unfortunate. It's hard to really kind of predict when that's going to happen, obviously. But, I think in the end, the fact that, Atlas came in when they did and we still were able to make the game and have that partnership, I'm just glad it really worked out. And, it's unfortunate the Kickstarter, it didn't work. But, I mean, it was great to get the game out there and have people, see it and play it and, sort of start the, people getting excited about it. So that part of it was good.
Yeah, because you did have a demo out at that time as well, which was a really, really solid demo and everyone was really excited about it.
Well, so the thing is, kind of what you're mentioning is there's a lot of projects that come on Kickstarter and, they kind of, even if they're funded or not, they kind of fade into obscurity sometimes. You're like, what? Was that a real thing? Is it coming up? So we wanted to say, like, look, this is real. This is a real product. This is a real game. It is a development. We've gone far away. Just, to give people that sort of piece of, like, this is happening,
Yeah.
So that was a big part of why we wanted to have that demo,
So when Atlas actually came in and got involved with development, were there any sort of, like, almost restrictions or anything? Or did they help you push anything into the game?
Yeah, I don't think there was really any restrictions, so to speak. I mean, they let us kind of, shape the game to the vision we had. Okay. But they did have a lot of feedback. I mean, one thing they said was, hey, look, the art style is really good. You should really push the animations and have characters really, really well animated. And so, we definitely took that into, sort of consideration. We, reanimated probably every character we had done up to that point and then kind of kept that style. So I think that was really good and really kind of brought the characters to life. They also really wanted to push for voice acting, which, they got in the game, I think was a huge add as well to kind of bring the characters to life. So it was more like, those kind of things they really pushed for and, sort of small things here and there. But in general, they weren't, very intrusive. They let us sort of, make the game we wanted to make. And, sort of if they disagreed with us, we could defend our position and sort of talk it out. So, they were very accommodating for that. Okay.
So that's quite cool, because the one thing that a lot of people always have a problem with coming onto a publisher as an indie developer is that a lot of publishers say you can't really include this or, they kind of pull things back. But from what you're saying, it seems like Atlas actually kind of pushed further for what you actually wanted. Which is...
Yeah, in most cases. I think there was a couple times, we didn't want that, or we had to kind of fight for it a bit. But, no, I'd say, by and large, they really kind of pushed in the direction of the vision of the game. And there wasn't a lot of restriction or things they wanted different or anything like that.
Okay. Well, that's cool. the thing with game development is obviously things change quite a lot as you're going through. Were there any ideas that you had initially, but you never really got in there for the final release?
Well, it's funny. So the very first, sort of concept of the game was, regular people are the heroes of the game. And so that obviously is what the final game's about. But originally, it was much more, you were sort of recruiting almost like nameless NPCs in town, and they weren't so unique. And the interesting thing about Citizens of Earth, as it kind of is now, is the characters you recruit are both generic in a sense, baker, school teacher, like they're very plain in a way, but they're brought to life in such, really, clever ways, and they're still full of character and life. They sort of have that weird dichotomy of like generic but very unique. And so, going back to the original idea of the game, it was much more like you were leading a team of just the average red shirt NPCs you'd see in a lot of RPGs, and it was, but the character design, our art director Robin kind of made for these characters, was so over the top and so unique. They're like, well, no one's going to look at this guy and think he's just a regular NPC. He's too unique, too stands out, which of course is great. And so the game design kind of changed a bit in that sense and really focused more on these, uniqueness of these citizens. So that was, again, sort of a big change. I mean, the other change I think were a little smaller, just levels that cut, we didn't have enough time to kind of make some levels, and there were a couple features. Like I really wanted to do multiplayer battles in the game. And I actually had it working. So going back to GDC 2013, when we first showed off the game, I had multiplayer battles hooked up through Steam, but actually Citizens of Earth wasn't like approved for Steam. So I actually used the Steam credentials of our last game, Waveform, and kind of hacked it together.
A little bit naughty, but just don't tell them.
So myself and Andrew, who's the tech director of the game, we were in our hotel room at GDC, like fighting each other on our machines, in all these multiplayer battles through Steam. And it was quite a lot of fun, but when Atlas came on, that was one thing they kind of had a red flag. They're like, look, if you want to do this, every platform has a huge list of like requirements to do multiplayer. It's so much harder to get the game through certification. And, in the end, I think they made the right call.
I'd probably say, I mean, the thing is that Steam is such an open platform from that sense, but when it comes to consoles, and you've got things like Xbox Live and PlayStation Network, and it's like, you've suddenly got all of these walls you have to fight through for everything.
Yeah, for sure. So, that was a feature that didn't make it in, maybe sometime in the future.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, I think that what works with the game to do something like multiplayer is that every single citizen is so unique in terms of how you use them. So I think that would work in a very interesting way. Like,
well, that was a big thing we wanted to do, is have like every citizen was designed sort of from the ground up to be totally unique. You've probably seen like no one shares any moves. There's no generic like attack, defend. Like they all have totally unique abilities. And when we were designing a lot of the citizens, a lot of their abilities, we did think of like, okay, well, would this work in multiplayer? Would this be fun, to fight against players? And so there was that, even though obviously that didn't really pan out for the final game, but we definitely had that thought of like, well, the characters should, feel balanced to other characters and have a good purpose and a good role in any kind of team. So it sort of informed some of the design, even though the feature never made it in.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. So speaking of like the characters and how unique they are, were there any, sort of, obviously they follow stereotypes to a degree. Were there any characters that you kind of thought about adding in but never really got far with them, or even you got them in but felt that they were a little bit too far in terms of power or anything?
I think mostly it went pretty well. I mean, so again, the art director, Robin, he did such a great job. Like we'd say, hey, we want, an exterminator. And he would just, how about this? He's concept up. And it was so perfect the first time. Like, that's amazing. We're doing it. Like, he just had such a skill at, bringing these characters to life. So, but, early on, we were kind of thinking of what characters we wanted. There were definitely sort of a bunch of ideas we thought and then rejected. I mean, during the sort of early stages of the game, we were still kind of figuring out, what kind of game it was. And, we were finalizing, like, what quality would make a good citizen, Like, we wanted something sort of generic, right? But not something that was, too specific, So we have, like, a baker, but we don't even, have, like, a French artisanal baker. You know what I mean? Like, that's a bit too specific.
Yeah.
Because the game's set in a modern setting, we wanted sort of modern professions. Like, someone said, well, what about, like, a mime or a clown? And, those are very colorful characters, but didn't really feel like they fit in.
The issue there is that you don't see them on like a daily basis.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Sorry. One guy on the team wanted a lady of the evening as a recurring character, but again, didn't really fit the tone we were going for, so that's out. And one of the actually interesting ones was, so the cat lady, which is in the game, and she's, this kind of young girl and obsessed with cats. She carries cats with her, wears cat clothing, and she's really just kind of a cute character. So originally we thought, well, the kind of a cat lady. We kind of rejected it, thinking of like, oh, it's the stereotype of the crazy old cat lady, right?
Yeah, like the cat lady from The Simpsons kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So we thought, well, that's a bit weird. But then again, Robin came by and said, well, what about this? And it had this, young girl, and then it just became a totally different dynamic. It wasn't crazy, weird cat lady. It was just a girl who is so in love with cats. And that was just sort of a fun twist on it. So.
Yeah. Well, I find, because that's kind of interesting, like, it's where you've taken the sort of a stereotype, but almost taken a unique twist to a stereotype in that sense. Like, every sort of generic, like, cartoon series, for example, like The Simpsons, where it's got crazy cat lady. Yeah, you've taken it, but you've decided to go with also childish and, like, these other natures that don't necessarily go with it.
Yeah. Well, another example is the lifeguard. So people think lifeguard, women, Baywatch and things like that. Well, I was like, well, I don't want that. So again, Robinson, what about, this character? And, she's like this big, husky, like, Eastern European woman with, like, crazy colored hair. And it just, again, it's a lifeguard, what you kind of know and expect, but it's kind of turned on its head.
Yeah.
In terms of, that aspect of the stereotype. So.
Yeah, no, that's very clever. So in terms of the game overall, like, where did the whole concept come from? Like, the idea of you're the vice president of the world, and it's about the collection of normal people.
So it actually goes back a long time. So I had the idea for Citizens of Earth even before we started working on our last game, Waveform. Because at the time, we thought, well, an RPG is too big. We couldn't do it. But I had this idea, just from playing games, from playing RPGs, they often have this storyline like, the world's coming to an end, there's some huge evil, but everyone just goes about their business. No one really seems to care. Yeah. And I thought, well, if the world really was coming to an end and everyone knew it, wouldn't they pitch in whatever way they could? And I thought, well, what if that was the game? What if it was just regular people pitching in? Because in this world, there are no, like, heroes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that kind of just began to shape into, regular people are the heroes. Because the idea of, like, you recruit anyone, I wanted someone to lead the team around, but not someone that would fight battles. And the reason, if you play a game like Suikoden or something where you recruit a lot of people, but still have the main character fight,
I was going to mention that game because that's one of my favorite games of all time. It really, that idea of so many characters really comes across.
For sure. And, in that game, like, you're always using your main character. He levels up huge and everyone else is slow. It's just a weird kind of dynamic. So I thought, well, I don't want the main character to fight. I thought, well, who would lead people around, but get them to do their dirty work for him? I thought, well, politician, obviously.
Yeah.
So take it to sort of a logical extreme. Who's the craziest politician? Well, he should be president of the whole world. And to really push the uselessness angle, he should be the vice president.
That's genius. So, like, obviously, you mentioned Suikoden, but what other games? I mean, quite clearly, Earthbound was an influence. But like, I imagine there were other titles that were kind of influential, like Pokemon. So,
Pokemon,
like,
for sure. Yeah.
With the whole nature of you got to catch them all kind of thing, and the training of each individual character. So, were there any other games?
I mean, so Earthbound was definitely a big one in terms of the tone and style and sort of modern setting, kind of comedic tone. That was big. Suikoden and Pokemon for sure were big in terms of like the large cast and how you're going to manage that. I even actually, while developing a lot of the early ideas for the game, I watched a lot of like YouTube videos of people playing Pokemon competitively just to see what they did with the characters and just to see unique strategies. So a lot of the citizens in the game have very unorthodox strategies. So some of them are your classic, like they just deal damage, very straightforward, but some have much more complicated, like kind of setup routines and kind of deal damage in very different ways. And a lot of it's inspired by the fact that in Pokemon they have kind of bizarre strategies sometimes to kind of do different things. So that was inspirational. The opening scene of the game was inspired by Chrono Trigger, where your mom kind of comes in and opens the blinds.
Yeah.
But instead of a young, wide-eyed kid, it's like a 40-year-old man. So we kind of just, again, turning that kind of scene on its head. I guess, kind of to a lesser extent, it was modeled by just, decades of playing JRPGs and just seeing, what they did, what worked, what didn't work, and just kind of combined, my love and passion for those games just kind of into, the final product.
Yeah, because the thing that I always took from Citizens of Earth when I was playing it is I was sort of thinking that this is the kind of game that if I was playing this 20 years ago, it would feel completely normal. Like, this is the kind of game that this is the period for this game.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like not many games come out that have this feel of like proper RPG. Like the standard combat, but at the same time with minor complexities that you can master. You can just play it with, the simple characters, but then you've got these unique strategies when you combine them.
Yeah.
And that's what I find that to be the shining moment with this game.
Oh, thanks, yeah. Well, it's funny. So, again, early on, we had someone, testers play the game, and one of them was trying all the citizens, and he said the first time he played the pharmacist, he's like, oh, this character sucks, he's so useless. But then he kind of realized what he could do. I was like, oh my gosh, he's so good if you kind of know his thing, and he can kind of control the whole battle, even though he doesn't really have anything that jumps out as very simple, like, deal damage, that kind of thing. So I wanted to push those elements, and, I guess, in a large way, we really wanted to make, like you said, the kind of game that really felt very special. We didn't just want to be like, well, here's an RPG, it's about, recruiting citizens, whatever. We really poured that kind of passion and polish into, every corner of the game we could, just to make it feel like, all around, very, like it was our best work, it was our, passion over many years, and just kind of push it as far as we could.
So how long did you work on this game overall? Would you say on obviously on and off with shows and everything in between?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much 3 years.
Yeah,
was mainly. I mean, like that was sort of 3 years, in chronologically, but a lot of us worked a lot of hours, so like we kind of put more than 3 years worth of time into it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, 3 years or so was sort of a good ballpark for how long we worked on it. So
because the team that's worked on it, obviously your credentials are extensive. I mean, having just quickly researched on you, like the previous titles that you've worked on, you worked on Luigi's Mansion on the 3DS.
Yeah.
And all of this. So what made you decide to sort of jump into independent development, like completely on your own?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a couple things. I mean, one, I've wanted to make games since I was just a tiny kid, and that sort of passion maybe, I was always coming up with ideas and, writing things down, and, you just don't really have an opportunity to sort of express that when you're just sort of working in a studio on other games. I mean, so I kept having all these ideas in my head, and I just needed a way to get them out, And then the other thing is, so I'm sort of I do programming and also game design, both, right? But I would only ever get hired for one at a job. So, I worked programming on Luigi's Mansion, Mario Strikers. I was a game designer at, Silicon Knights, working there. And I always want to do both, because I like coming up with ideas and then, putting them in the game and seeing how they feel. And, without the opportunity to kind of, really get my hands dirty in all the parts of the aspect I was interested in, it always felt like something was missing.
Right.
So I thought, well, I'll, go on my own, and I can do exactly sort of what I'm passionate about, and then work on all these games that are, kind of in my mind that I want to get out there. So it's kind of both those reasons.
Okay, it's a very noble thing to do, because obviously a lot of people, it's a scary venture to go from working for lots of companies getting paid on a regular basis to doing your own thing, and is it going to work, is it not going to work?
Yeah.
So I think that's very brave of you. So in terms, obviously this is a trivia channel. Are there any sort of like major Easter eggs people are going to be able to find? Because I've played it for half the game or so, for what I figure is about half the game. But I've already seen 6 or 7 Easter eggs that really stand out, and I know, having played it, I've seen Easter eggs, and even for me, I'm not quite sure what they reference. So I know that it's an Easter egg. So is there anything like you can sort of give away in terms of an Easter egg or anything? Like,
yeah, I mean, one good one is in the first town you start in the game, there's a police station. If you go in the back, you find, reference, don't want to spoil it, but there's a reference to Earthbound. And, since in a lot of ways, that first town and the first sort of start of the game was sort of inspired by Earthbound. You wake up and you walk outside in your town and, you're kind of starting, kind of a normal day that becomes not so normal.
Yeah.
And so, we definitely kind of wanted to put a few Earthbound references throughout the game. Even actually, so one of the citizens, the homeless guy, so all the citizens in the game have a unique talent they can do sort of in the world. And the homeless guy he can root through garbage cans and find treasure. And of course, that's what you could do in Earthbound. And I thought, well, that was kind of funny. So we brought it back in this game and sort of tied it to the homeless guy's talent. So you find garbage cans throughout the world. You can loot them and sort of reference Earthbound. So that's another one. So yeah, there's a couple in the main town, there, and the police station I mentioned. So yeah.
Yeah. Because I do remember when I was playing it, I was like, okay, well, I know this. There's there's trash everywhere. There's garbage cans. Obviously, there's going to be items in them, but you can't look in them because you're the vice president of the world. And he's like, I'm not going to look through there. That's kind of disgusting.
Yeah.
So the only other question I really have is the idea of the fact that this game is being released on so many consoles.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like developing the game for so many consoles? Like, in terms of releasing a game on PC, it's fairly straightforward. But when it comes to consoles, you've got so many different things you have to go through. And I mean, how many consoles is it being released on?
And including PC, there's 5. So yeah, PC and then PlayStation 4, Wii U, Vita, 3DS.
Right.
So, but yeah, well, it was quite challenging, as you can probably imagine. So all the code in the game is written from scratch. Like, we're kind of using our own in-house engine, so we had to do all the ports just on our own. So that was tricky. You have to kind of learn what all the different platforms do. They all have their own systems for graphics and audio and input and on and on and on. So we're rewriting a lot of code for that. The 3DS was particularly tricky just because the screen is so small.
Yeah.
We had to kind of revise a lot of the UI in the game and a lot of things to sort of just fit. So that was a kind of a unique challenge. But of course we had to buy development kits for them. Each development kit is $2,000-$3,000.
Yeah.
So if you're doing 4 platforms, couple programmers, that adds up pretty darn fast.
Yeah.
So it was and our Vita kits broke, so that was really unfortunate, but it happens, I guess. So kind of a huge monetary cost, and a huge time investment to kind of get everything up and running, and then a huge sort of design shift to kind of make it look good, to feel good on those platforms. So, and again, our team is so small that they said there's basically 2 programmers, 5 platforms.
Right.
So it was a lot to do and to tackle. But I think one thing that sort of helped us was, right from the beginning, I wanted the game to sort of have this high-res 2D look. And that really worked quite well, because if we went with a 3D game, I don't think we would have been able to release it on Vita or 3DS. It was not quite as powerful. But if we went with a more retro pixel approach, I don't think it would have looked good on that huge spectrum of platforms.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of sizing and scaling. So that actually made things work pretty well. We were able to kind of retain the look of the game across all platforms pretty easily. But yeah, it was definitely really challenging. And even getting the game through Nintendo and Sony, they have pretty rigorous certification sort of procedures and
I mean, the history of Nintendo's restrictions in terms of games is extensive. I mean, it's ridiculous. Having worked on a website that catalogs this sort of stuff, you just see things and it's like, this is okay. They have to let up somewhere to release an actual game.
Yeah.
So I mean, from that sense, did you actually have any issues in terms of releasing it on Nintendo consoles or anything? Did any of these platforms have problems?
No, not real problems. I mean, they all had their own quirks. We'd, try to submit it and they would send it back and say, well, we want you to do this and that little thing. Or Nintendo, the Wii U and 3DS have these sort of in-game manuals now. Yeah. They're like, oh, well, you used an outdated manual template. You need to redo it and resubmit it. And it's so frustrating because it takes weeks and weeks to get them to play the game. It kind of goes in a big queue and then they take weeks to get back to you. So just for a small, change in the game's manual, not even the game, it could be a month turnaround. So things start, just the time, and unfortunately, the game had a couple delays. It's supposed to come out earlier, but it's really hard. That turnaround is just, it really adds up to a couple weeks, couple months here and there, and suddenly you've 2 or 3 months have gone by.
Yeah.
So it's really tricky. But I mean, Nintendo's probably a bit worse, but Sony definitely is also tricky to try. They have their own requirements and quirks as well.
But no, I would say, I mean, this is a solid game. I had my doubts, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but like most indie games, when they come out and you sort of play them, you think, okay, because I've obviously played it prior to release, and it's that feeling of like, okay, most indie games that come out prior to release, it's full of bugs. Yeah, and it's like, it's a bug, you just kind of ignore it, but it's really solid, and I think that's commendable.
Yeah, well, it's funny, coming from a background of sort of mainstream development, I really kind of wanted to bring that sense of polish and professionalism, I guess, in a sense, to the games. And I worked closely with Nintendo for a long time, and just to see the way they have like a laser focus on every aspect of the game, that really sort of inspired me and sort of informed how I do development. And one of the things I always said to the team when we were developing is, we're making an indie game, but when people play it, I want people to say, like, this is an indie game, as opposed to, well, this is an indie game. You know what I mean? It's like the same statement, but the tone is different. Like, one is you expect an indie game and you're surprised, as opposed to finding a lot of problems and being and just kind of brushing them off as, well, it's an indie game, what can you expect?
So, speaking of which, how many members of the team are there? As you said, you've got 2 programmers. Mm-hmm. And I mean, how many other people, obviously, like core developers, did you actually have involved?
Well, I mean, at the game's peak, there was probably about 12, but, that would have been, 2 full-time, myself and the other programmer full-time, a bunch of, part-time, half-time, and then we, contracted out some other, art and things like that. So it's a pretty big spectrum in terms of, like, the magnitude of contribution. A couple programmers, couple artists, couple level designers, couple audio folks, and it kind of adds up.
Finally, I'd just like to say thanks to Ryan for taking the time to let us talk with him. If you'd like to keep up with more of our videos, consider subscribing to Did You Know Gaming on YouTube, or you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter.